Let's use this PowerPoint sentence diagramming template now to draw a diagram of some moderate complexity. First, we are going to decide what to do with our margins. This box is for half-inch margins, this box for 1-inch margins. I don't need half-inch margins for this diagram, it's not that long. And so we'll delete that box and just leave our 1-inch box. I'll come here and triple-click to paste the Greek text of the passage. And as you can see, it's far too large, but we can deal with that by selecting all and changing the size to 11 points. And then we'll double-click that bottom line and remove it. Now we're ready to start diagramming, but before we do, let's just kind of survey the sentence, see what kind of grammatical constructions we're looking at, get the lay of the land so we know where we're headed. We start with the genitive absolute construction, Jesus having been begotten in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Then we come to our main clause, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, another participle clause now to modify that main clause, saying, and then a quotation telling what they say, where is the one having been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we came to worship him. So let's go ahead and start with that genitive absolute construction. I'm going to need a genitive absolute participle symbol, and I'm going to have a prepositional phrase in Bethlehem, a simple modifier of Judea, another prepositional phrase in the days, simple modifier of Herod, and then an appositive, the king. So let's drag a bunch of symbols out onto the screen where we can use them, out onto the drawing canvas. Here's a genitive absolute participle construction. I'm going to hold the control key down, and when I drag this out holding the control key down, it drags a copy and leaves the original in place for use later. I will need two simple prepositional phrases, so I'll drag one of these out, and then I will control drag another right from there, saving me the trouble of mousing all the way back over to the right. Also, I'll need two of these modifiers, so let's bring two of these out, and again, duplicate over here. I will also need an appositive symbol, so let's drag it out. Now, all these are a little low on the screen. We can't see our text very well while seeing those symbols, so let's just move them up a little bit here, and that will help us out. Now, we also have a conjunction de that begins the whole thing, to de. And so let's go ahead and diagram that conjunction on its symbol. De does not introduce the genitive absolute participle. Sometimes students will make that mistake thinking that because de belongs in word order to the group including the participle that it must introduce that clause, but that's not so. De is introducing the main clause, Magi arrived at Jerusalem. And so we'll just leave this standing separately from the genitive absolute as we diagram for now. I have selected the word de. I'm going to do Control-C to copy it. Then I'm going to change it to a gray color. The reason for that is that I want to know that I've already got that word on my diagram somewhere. And by turning words gray as I copy and paste them into my diagrams, then I'll be able to clearly see which words remain to be true. Okay, let's get the referent for the genitive absolute. To Jesu in the genitive case. I'll copy that, I'll turn it gray, and then I'll bring it down here and triple click to select all of that and then paste. And you may wonder, why did you include the word de after saying it doesn't belong to the genitive absolute? Well, just because it was in the middle there. I thought it was easier to just delete it from the word group down here on the baseline than to deal with two separate words in that text box at the top. Genethentos is the participle. We will copy and turn it gray, come down here, select the participle text, and replace it. Now, we don't have a direct object at all for this participle, so we can just come and select this whole group, and then we'll click again to select this direct object marker, and we'll delete it. We will also click in the object text box, press escape once, so that now I'm not in the text entry mode, I just have that text box selected. And I'll press delete to get rid of that. Now this line is way too long, and we also have some excessive white space here. So let's just work on neatening things up a little bit. I'm going to select all three of these objects, both text boxes and the subject-verb divider, and I'm just going to bump them over to the left. After I've gone over as far as I want to go with to Jesu, I'll shift-click to unselect that one, and then I'll bump the remaining two over a little further, and then I'll shift-click on the line to unselect it, and I'll bump the participle over a little further. Then I will choose that baseline within the group, and holding the Shift key down to constrain it to the horizontal, I will bring it over so that things are much more compact down. Now we're ready to get our first prepositional phrase diagrammed. I'll just select the whole phrase in Bethlehem of Judea, copy it, turn it gray, come down here, triple click on the object of the preposition, and paste. And then I will take of Judea, my cursor is already at the end of that line, so I'll shift click to select the words of Judea, Control X to cut, then I'll come over here and select the word modifier and paste the text here. You notice how tes Judaios kind of touches against that diagramming symbol a little bit right at the left edge of the tau. Really don't like that, and so I'm going to click within the word Judaios, hit escape to select that text box and just bump that over a little bit. And now it looks much better. Then I'm coming back to my prepositional phrase. The preposition in needs to move from where it is over into the preposition slot. So now I've done that. I won't take the time to tighten up in Bethlehem as I did the genitive absolute baseline because I don't think there's need for you to see that again. Now let's drag our prepositional phrase up here, and you'll notice that it drags pretty naturally right into position, intersecting the bottom of that baseline for the participle very precisely. Most of the dragging you do will naturally click right into place. It's because I've set a 1/20th of an inch grid for this document, and then I've made my drawing objects in 1/20th of an inch size. And so for the most part, you'll find things fitting together nicely. There are some things that are not so precisely sized, and you'll have to fiddle with them a little bit more. But that preposition went right into place, prepositional phrase, and this modifier will go right into place as well. Now we have a second prepositional phrase, in the days of Herod the king. So we will select all of that, and again copy, turn it gray, come down here to this prepositional phrase, and paste it there. And of course it looks like a mess right now, but we'll parcel it out piece by piece and it will look fine. To basileos is the appositive, renaming the name Herod. So we will cut it and put it in the appositive slot down here on that symbol. Then Herod is our simple genitive modifier for the word days. We will cut it and paste it over here where it belongs. And once again, we need to move our preposition also into its proper slot. All right, in the days of Herod, and Herod has an appositive, the king, that renames it. And it looks like we're in pretty good shape with that phrase. Now I need to connect it up where it belongs in relation to the genitive absolute, and you can see that the modifier Judaios is hanging low enough to keep me from being able to raise this right up into position. So I will get it approximately into position, and then I will select the group, and within the group I have now selected the line, and I need to drag this line up at the same angle to catch this corner of the first prepositional phrase right here, the lower left corner. Now, if I just start dragging, I'm going to lose track of the angle. If you're not picky about the angle, it doesn't really matter. But you can drag a line at exactly the same angle if you hold down the Control and Shift keys together as you drag. I'm not sure what the Macintosh equivalent for this would be, but on a Windows computer, Control and Shift as you drag will constrain the line to the same angle that it originally was. Now, I don't have things perfectly positioned here. By offsetting this just slightly to the right from the lower left corner of the previous prepositional phrase, it looks like the second prepositional phrase modifies n rather than being a further modifier for genethentos. So I really need to nudge this just a little bit over to the left. So I'm pressing the arrow key once. That's not quite enough. I'll press it a second time. That's a little too much. And so I need to nudge in smaller increments, which I can do by holding down the Control key as I use the arrow keys. And now it moves it just the tiniest amount each time, and it all looks good. Now that I have the genitive absolute phrase diagrammed, I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to group it. Control G in Windows. I believe on the Macintosh that command is Command Option G. I may be mistaken about that. And I don't think I'll try to give Macintosh equivalents for all the keystrokes. If you're using a Macintosh, you'll have to find those by Google or within the help files of your program. Now that we're finished with the genitive absolute, we can go on to the main clause. And when we do so, we see that the first word of the main clause, idu, is an interjection, and we realize that we should not have brought out just a simple introductory conjunction symbol for death. we should have brought out a symbol that combines a conjunction and an interjection. So I'll bring one of those out now, and I will copy and paste the de from its incorrect symbol onto the correct symbol. When I've done that, I no longer need that symbol, so I've selected and deleted it. Hit do, select now, turn it gray, and then paste it into its proper place. Now that line's a little long, so we will shorten it. I'm holding the Shift key down again to constrain that line to horizontal as I drag to shorten it. Now we'll drag all of this up into the upper left corner where it will sit and wait nicely for the main clause eventually to be joined to it. For the main clause, I have the subject magoi and the verb paragenon ta. There's no complement of any kind, so the baseline I need is just the one consisting of subject and verb. So let's bring that out here, and I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll select this whole clause from magoi through ace hierosaluma. We'll copy it, turn it gray, and we'll just put all of it in the verb slot for now. And as we've done before, we'll parcel things out a piece at a time. Starting at the right end, let's bring up a prepositional phrase symbol for ace hierosaluma, and we'll cut ace and paste it into its place, and we will cut hierosaluma and paste it into its place. And then we have another prepositional phrase, apa anatalon. We'll just drag a copy of this prepositional phrase down and use it again. So anatalon, we will cut and paste, and apa, we will cut and paste. Then magoi is the only word we have left other than the verb, which is already in its proper place. So I have cut it now, and I will paste it where it says subject. All right, the two prepositional phrases, one of them clearly modifies paragenon ta, so I'll put it in position as so. This next one is a little more difficult. Does it also modify the verb, they arrived from the east, or is this identifying the magoi a little more closely? Magoi from the east arrived at Jerusalem. I usually like to construe prepositional phrases with the verb, unless I just feel compelled to construe them with some other part of the sentence. Here, just for the sake of variety and to show you some other functions, I will go ahead and lengthen this baseline some to the left, and that will give us room to bring the prepositional phrase over into its position without interfering with the subject-verb divider line here. All right, so the wise men arrived at Jerusalem, and then we are ready to go on to verse 2 with the second participle. Of course, if you were doing this yourself, you would press Control S or whatever command you do to save files. You'd want to save things piece by piece as we go. Let's go ahead and group this main clause into one unit here in case we decide we need to move it around. In fact, it is really time to move it, isn't it? And so let's go ahead and connect it up with the symbols that we used for the conjunction and the interjection. And maybe you'd like to group all of that together. It's okay to have groups within groups in PowerPoint. You probably don't want to layer those too deeply, but several layers of groups within groups are usually not that difficult to sort out in the event that you have to take things apart and redo some diagramming when your first idea proves perhaps not to be the best and you have to reconfigure. All right, our genitive absolute participle, let's go ahead and bring it up where it belongs, and I'm going to click the group and then click that dotted line and shift drag to drag vertically right up here to connect to the main clause. Now we're ready to go on to verse 2 and diagram this participle phrase starting with legontes. What we're going to do is kind of repurpose a prepositional phrase symbol to use it instead as a participle and direct object symbol. Now the object is not expressed with a word that we're going to have to put in the object slot, so I'm just going to delete this text box. The object is going to be a quotation that we're going to have to diagram in a different way than putting words right in this slot. So with that object gone, now I'm going to click on the line that separates verb from object, and I'm going to move it over because we need a little more space for the participle legontes than I allowed for a preposition, since most of the prepositions are pretty short words. All right, let's copy that word, turn it gray, come down here, double click, and paste it in. And then I'm going to hit escape so that that text box is selected. And now I can bump it over to the right so that it's nicely positioned in its slot. Now, what is it that they're saying? They're saying all of the rest of verse 2. And the way we diagram a quotation is we use this downward pointing stilt, or some people call it a standard. And we'll drag it right into proper position here. I seem to have trouble dragging, so I'll just use the arrow key to get it right where I want it. And then we need a baseline for the main clause, perhaps the only clause that belongs in this sentence. We'll talk about that later, but we have another clause here. Where is the one having been born, King of the Jews? So I have a verb, estin. I have its subject, a rather long phrase, the one having been born King of the Jews. That's going to take some special handling. I don't have a predicate nominative after estin. The idea that fills out estin is the adverb pu. So I just need a subject-verb baseline again, like I used before. So let's bring another one of these out. And for the subject, I'm going to need a substantival participle. That's going to require another one of these standards. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment, or a stilt if you prefer to call it a stilt. And then we need a symbol that has room for a verb and a predicate nominative, because basileus is predicate nominative after tekthais. So we'll bring a verb predicate nominative symbol out. And I like to bring these stilts into contact with the verb slot of the clause that they introduce. So I have this stilt coming up under the verb slot here. And in the verb slot will go the participle. I'm going to go ahead and select more than the participle right now and parcel it out like we've done with other phrases. I've copied it. Now I'm turning it gray, and I will paste it. Now, King of the Jews is going to be a simple modifier, so let's bring a simple modifier out to receive that phrase. And I've selected tone, and now eudion, and I will cut and paste it here. And the word king, I will cut and paste it in the predicate nominative slot. Now you see how tone eudion, as I look at this, that tau overprints the angled line to the left. So again, I'm going to select that and bump it over a little bit to the right. And then King of the Jews can come, or Jews I should say, of the Jews can come under the word king to complete that phrase. Now all of that, the one having been born King of the Jews, is the subject of this clause. So I want to put that right in the subject slot like this. Now I have all this vertical space here. This is a rather long stilt, longer than it would necessarily have to be. If I could move all this to the left so that of the Jews could drop down into this area closer to the baseline, then I'd have a little bit more compact diagramming. So let's do it that way. Let's extend this line to the left by a considerable little distance, and then let's get all of this. Let's see how much that selects. I've selected what I hope is my participle phrase. To make sure I haven't selected anything extraneous, I'm going to delete. All of it deleted. Everything else is still there, so it looks like I have it selected like I want. Then I'm just going to use my arrow key to bump it over far enough to clear this subject-verb divider. And then let's just bump it over a little bit to the right to give us a little more clearance yet. Now, at this point, I'm going to select all of this because my margin line, as you can see, is kind of in the way. So let's bring that over here to the right so that we're away from there. And now let's shorten this vertical line of this standard so that we can save ourselves a little bit of vertical space here. If all of these symbols were grouped, then this would go a little quicker. I'm going to nudge this with small steps right in place, but I didn't group all of those, and so that meant I select a little bit more tediously. And I still think I would like this horizontal line to come over just a little farther to the left. That looks a little better. Now the verb for this main clause is estin, so I will copy it, turn it gray, come down here and paste. And then I have an adverb, pu, and so I'll bring out a simple modifier, which is going to go under the verb, and then pu I will copy, gray, paste. Now, here's another good reason to have moved that whole participle phrase over to the left as far as we did. As we continue to build this, and let's go ahead and group this portion so we can move it all together easily. As we go ahead and build this, we realize that this stilt symbol needs to come down all the way to this baseline to make the connection that we need. And I could not have done that if this participle phrase, that is the subject, were higher and farther over to the right. It would interfere, and this line would have to come down through the middle of this text. So that was another good reason to move all this to the left. That leaves room for our stilt so that we have things just like we need them here. All right, I'm going to select all of that, group it, and then drag it approximately into position here to connect up as I would like it to connect. Now, how would I like it to connect? Do I want this vertical line to come up to this bottom left corner of this participle phrase as a further participle modifying the verb? That certainly is defensible. You might be a little disturbed to see a dotted line turn into a solid line as you move down this modifier line. And if that bothers you, then what we could do is just move this a little bit over to the left and bring it as a separate modifier for the main verb paragenonta. And that certainly is a very defensible thing to do. So either way. Okay, we're at a point now where we just have one clause left to diagram. It's actually a compound clause, I guess you could say, with two verbs, edamen and eilthamen, so there's some complexity. We also have a decision to make about how we're going to handle the gar. Are we going to treat this as a brand new sentence so that gar is an introductory conjunction like de, or are we going to take gar as introducing a continuation of the sentence that began with a question so that the Magi are asking, where is he because we saw his star? I think either of those approaches is defensible, but I want to show you some things about diagramming that will come out best, I think, if we take this clause as an extension of the sentence that has already begun rather than as a brand new sentence. So to do that, I'm going to need to make room for a subordinate clause to drop from the esten. And to do that, it's going to work best if I take this adverb modifier for pu and move it over to the right. So I have made that change, and while I'm at it, I'm just going to shorten this horizontal line that doesn't need to be nearly so long. And we will plan to develop our second half of verse 2 down here in the lower right-hand part of the page. Now, that separates me from my text and complicates things a little bit. So what I'm going to do, you could deal with that any number of ways. The way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to drag the text down and let it overprint some things here for the moment. And I won't worry about what it's overprinting because soon enough we will put things back together just fine. Now I have two verbs, we saw, we came, so I'm going to need a series symbol on which to put those two verbs. So let's go ahead and get edamen first. Copy gray and put it on its baseline. And then we will get eilthamen. Copy. Almost forgot to make that gray. And put it on its slot. Now, we saw has a direct object. So we need to add a direct object here. To do that, I'll scroll up here and you'll see some vertical lines here. The upper set is a little bit longer than the lower set. These are subject-predicate dividers, and these are verb-object dividers to be used within the predicate, the shorter ones. So I'm going to drag one of the shorter single lines down to use to show the direct object after edamen. So we have it in place, and now we need the phrase the star. So I have selected it, I've copied it, I have grayed it, but now I don't have a text box in which to put it, do I? How do I put it here in the object slot? Well, a couple of ways we could go about that. I did provide a text box that just says any word. So you could drag a copy of that text box out, select any word, and paste your Greek word where it belongs. I don't think I'll do it that way. I think I will instead come down to edamen and we'll just lengthen this text box by putting in a space and pasting the star. Now when I put in a space, you see it capitalized Amen. I have some autocorrect settings enabled that aren't really suitable for sentence diagramming, but I'm not going to take the time to change those right now. I need a few more spaces to allow room for the divider between verb and object here. So now I have put those in place, and everything looks pretty good there. As I look at this series symbol, I'm reminded that I need my conjunction here, so I will select chi, copy, gray, select, paste. And we have a modifier for star. It is his star. So I'll bring out another simple modifier and connect it under star. Then once again, select, copy, gray, paste. And we have a prepositional phrase in the east that we need to deal with. And as I drug that prepositional phrase out, I noticed that apparently I accidentally drugged the only copy of the right angle prepositional phrase out onto the canvas earlier. And so I've lost that now. Pretty good chance in most diagramming that you won't be needing that again. If you did, you would just come up here and get the one that I drug out and made into this participle phrase and make a copy of it and reuse it. Or there are multiple slides in this template, so I could go to another slide and copy the object from that slide, bring it back to this one, paste, and there it is in case I need it. All right, now let's get my prepositional phrase in the east. Select it, copy, gray, paste it all in the object slot, and then take the preposition, cut it, and paste it where it belongs. Now, in the east is probably best taken as a modifier for Amen. So we're going to have to do some adjusting here. Actually, we could lengthen that line so that in the east could fit up nice and snugly under Amen, but another way we could do this is just bring it down here under the out2 a little bit and then lengthen this line. So Control-Shift, again, is the combination that will allow us to lengthen lines without losing their angle. So I have done that, and that will serve quite well. I'll just nudge this over a couple of steps to give us a little distance between the prepositional phrase and the chi so that things don't get too confusing to the eye. Right now we have some extra vertical space here, so we can tighten this up a little if we want to by just dragging upward. And when you do that, let me drag upward more so you can see this a little more clearly. When you resize this way, some things change in the proportions, and now prepositional phrases that were connected just exactly right have a little gap between themselves and the baseline that they connected to. Also, my Greek text is really tight down to those baselines now, and I may want to move those up a little bit. So I'm going to select the text and just hit my up arrow to nudge them up a little bit. And then I'm going to select these symbols with the modifiers. And the same way, I'm going to nudge them up a little bit and get them right into position. All right, that seems to work pretty well. Now we have this gar standing out here, don't we? We have to decide what we're going to do with it. Well, wherever things are going to connect, we do know that that gar is going to go on the subordinate clause symbol. So we can go ahead and put it there. And then we know that this is going to come down here to introduce this clause, but we still need our subject. We saw and we came both have an understood subject. So what we will do here is we will lengthen this little stub on the conjunction symbol, and we'll bring it over like this, and then we'll go back up to the top and we'll get one of these subject-verb dividers, and we'll control drag to bring it down. And then the other thing we need is a text box so that we can put the elliptical subject. So I'm just going to grab a text box. It says preposition here. I'm going to copy that, and I'm not going to paste it within the group, and I'm not going to control drag. I need to get it outside of its group. Control drag would reposition it, but it would leave it grouped with the other objects. So I'm going to click outside the group and hit paste, and then I can grab it there. It's a little hard to see because of how it's overprinting other things. I'll bring that down here. I'll select the word preposition and I'll put the parenthetical capital X that is usually used for an elliptical subject. And now the only problem is that I have just a little bit of an offset where this conjunction symbol connects to the series symbol. So I will nudge this with control arrows and get it right into place where everything looks really nice. Now all we need to do is deal with the infinitive phrase, to worship him, and then we'll be ready to stitch things together and we'll be done. For the infinitive phrase, I need, again, as I said I probably would not, but I do need, again, this square prepositional phrase symbol, which I will control drag down to here. Not that this is a prepositional phrase, but again, we can make a secondary use of that symbol by putting a verb form on it, and we will resize it as we need to. The auto we will also copy, and I failed to gray out the infinitive, not that it really matters now that we're done diagramming, but for consistency's sake, let's go ahead and make those things gray. Now, as you can see, pros kinesi doesn't fit the space where it's supposed to be, but we can easily enough modify. Let's move auto way over, and let's see if we can click this little vertical line and move it way over. And then the infinitive pros kinesi can move over. And I got that line a little too far to the right, so we'll bring it back to the left a notch, and it looks beautiful just like that. All right, so we came to worship him. The only thing that's missing is that some people like to put a double line like this with infinitives, a subject-predicate divider, just to the left of an infinitive. If we're going to include that, then we'll have to bump these things over a little further to the right to make room for that. So we can bring this down now, and now we're following the rule a little more precisely. All right, and then this needs to connect up to the clause that it modifies, and I don't want to get that too close because that double vertical line just needs a little space to allow it to stand out to the eye for what it is. So I'm going to leave that a little bit lower and drag this vertical line, holding the shift key, drag it to where it's supposed to go. All right, that looks good. Let's group all of this, since we're probably going to keep it together as a unit. And let's get this text box out of our way. I will put it back to the top of the page where it needs to go. And now we just need to figure out how to put this subordinate clause where it belongs as modifying STEN. Now I think you can see a problem here with what I've done, and that is that I'm now violating my margins. And I can't move that far to the left. This is not really a big problem. I could probably manage quite easily. But let me show you another diagramming symbol that comes in handy for places where positioning really is a problem. I'm going to go ahead and move this downward to just kind of get it out of the way a little bit. And I'm going to get this little extender symbol from up above and control drag a copy of it and show you what this is for. Now the idea of the extender is that it starts with a solid line. It would descend from some head word that it modifies at an appropriate angle. And here the appropriate angle slants from upper left to lower right. My little symbol has a vertical line, so how do I get it to be at the proper angle? Well, I will just click on it to select it within the group, and without holding the shift key down, I will drag to get it parallel with the line on the subordinate clause symbol. Then I'll go ahead and raise that up under the verb, and the dotted portion of that is the extender portion. That can come as far over to the left as it needs to displace an element to the left, or it could go to the right. You could reconfigure it so that it goes to the right, but that displaces an element horizontally so that you can keep things within the margins of the page. So at this point, we're finished drawing this diagram. Now, it's not very satisfying because you wouldn't print this off and give it to somebody or put it in a notebook or something like that with all of this stuff on the page, and it's an odd size page too. So how would you get this to 8.5 by 11? One thing I guess we would do is go ahead and delete that margin box since we don't need it anymore. How would we get this down to 8.5 by 11 letter size paper? Well, that's the topic of a separate video, converting this to 8.5 by 11. It's not difficult, but I just didn't want to lengthen this video with that further information. So look for that separate video for that function.